While me and some other Bulls fans share some big optimism coming into the season for the Chicago Bulls, we do have to ask the question that if the Bulls do continue to struggle, especially up until the trade deadline with the assets that they do have available, will they look to make a big move? We're going to talk about that, plus dive into the mailbag, all that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host here, Hayes, holding it down solo as I always do, but it's Saturday, so that means it's the mailbag episode. Make sure you guys are following the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into the content for today. And first up, we got talking about the Bulls and what likelihood do they have to make a move at the trade deadline if this team continues to struggle or is mediocre at the trade deadline. Now, I've been very, consistent in looking at the way that AK operates and saying that a full blow up is very unlikely with this team. And I know that's not what a lot of Bulls fans want to hear when they look at this team and where they currently sit. A lot of Bulls fans want to hear that the Bulls will be willing to go full rebuild or something like that. And realistically, I just don't necessarily see it happening. But you do have to ask the questions that with the assets that the Bulls have, right, still having most of their mid-level exception, their biannual exception, having the $10.2 million disabled player exception from the Lonzo Ball injury. If this team does struggle and is completely mediocre or lives up to the expectations of like an ESPN where they're only around 36, 37 wins and look to project to be that, will this team then look to make a move? Now, who is the Bulls' biggest trade chip in a case like that? I still think it's Zach LaVine when you look at the fact of in the last 4 years, Zach LaVine has averaged 25.5 points per game, 4.5 assists, and a 55.8 effective field goal percentage. That comes there are only four players in the NBA that either meet or exceed that, and that's Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and LeBron James. That does not, by any stretch of the imagination, mean that Zach LaVine is a perfect player or even at the level of those players, but Zach LaVine does have value. And I think sometimes as Bulls fans, as zoomed up as we are sometimes with this team, is that we just look at what Zach LaVine does not bring. And we look at that and then try to quantify that as his value, where Zach, yes, is a flawed player. And we do want to see Zach take steps defensively, which he took a little bit of last season. If you look at his defensive numbers, his on-off numbers, and his defensive rating, they all were creeping up for Zach LaVine, especially when he was fully healthy, right? And I think that coming into a season of full health for Zach LaVine, where he's been able to just hopefully work on some things with his game this offseason, refine some things, and he's going to hit the ground running all full speed like we want and hope to see from Zach LaVine. I think there are a lot of hopes or reasons for hope for Zach LaVine. But, could the Bulls look to move him, right? Could the Bulls look to move a Vooch, a Kobe White, a DeMar DeRozan, all players with really reasonable contracts at this point in time? And if the Bulls were to blow it up, right? Let's just say if. I'm not saying that the Bulls are, but if the Bulls, not even blow it up, I think that's too strong of a word, but if the Bulls were to look to make a major move, they have now the assets to be able to match salaries to do so. The biggest question is, are teams going to be as interested in their assets? And then are they going to be willing to part for it, and what value they're going to be looking back? For example, a player like Alex Caruso that the front office has been listening to deals on, not necessarily shopping, but have not found that equal value that they hold Alex Caruso in, and the Bulls may find themselves in a similar scenario with anybody on their roster, right? And so it ultimately comes down to this, right? Yes, the Bulls could look to do something at this trade deadline because, just simply put, they have the assets and the contracts to do so. But you also have to have a willing partner, participant, and a target that is going to improve your team. And while some Bulls fans are like, just trade everybody, let our draft picks get better, it makes right now, with where the Bulls are, it makes very little sense for the Bulls to really try to move their assets to just increase their own first-round picks. Yeah, we have our own first-round pick outright this season, but we still owe a first-round pick out to the San Antonio Spurs before the end of this season, right? Well, that next season is when we owe that one to, not this upcoming draft, but the next draft. And so I don't see a team going full blow it up, but they could look to make a considerable retooling move in that time. And so, we'll see. At the end of the day, anything is possible. This is the NBA. And while I think it's unlikely, just looking at the track history of this front office, right, I can't say that it's outside the realm of possibility. That would be unfair and unrealistic to say that it's just completely not possible the Bulls look to do something. Now, I think when you look at AK and things like that, and you got to ask yourself too, is this the front office that is going to get the most value out of something like that, right? Is this the front office that is going to make the right move when we need them to make one, right? There's enough questions to ask around that, but I do think that the Bulls are set up that if they want to be buyers, and if a disgruntled player becomes available, anything in between happens between now and the trade deadline, paired with the Bulls maybe not even meeting their internal expectations, that's where things can start getting interesting around Chicago. And so we'll keep it. We'll monitor it. We'll keep it. I want to talk about it. The Bulls were listed on an article by Bleacher Report as being one of Zach LaVine being one of the players to look to move. Him and Pascal Siakam super high on that list of players that could be moved by the trade deadline, and really, the team that their team could go into, moving in a different direction. But let me know what you guys think on that. If the Bulls are struggling, are mediocre still, what percentage chances do you give it that the Bulls may look to make a move by the trade deadline? Let me know all that down below. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. It's Friday. It's Saturday, so that means it's Mailbag Day. It's built mainly around your voicemails. We're going to get to play this first voicemail. This one's from Q.
Hey, it's me, Q. You're probably not going to use this one. It's the beginning of the week, but I just finished watching your episode about Kobe and P. Will, and you were talking about if Torrey Craig and Javon Carter take the starting spot this year, how would that that could affect the development of Kobe and P. Will. But my thought is, it's like if they are not confident enough to start Kobe, I don't think Kobe should start. That's just my personal opinion. I think Pat should start though. I think with him, I think it's just gotta be a trial of fire with him. I think he's just gonna have to he's really gonna have to play some minutes and really get out there, and so he could get better. He could figure out what he needs to do to be better. But anyway, if Torrey Craig and Javon Carter start for this season, I'm thinking well, what's the point in really keeping P. Will and Kobe? It's like they've been on the team for years now. Both of them. I mean, I think Pat's got 3 years. Kobe's got 5 or 6. So it's like they've kind of started in and out, I guess. But it's like if they're not that confident in them to start, and they rather start two guys that they're paying really low contracts, they'd rather start them than start. It's like they'd rather, if they start Javon Carter, they're paying him $7 million, and Kobe's getting $30 million. It's like, what's the point in keeping Kobe or P. Will if they're getting paid more money to sit on the bench? It's like I just don't understand that. But the last comment I wanted to make is that I got season tickets. I try to go to as many games as I can, and I wanted to try to, after every game that I go to, call and send a voicemail to you, I guess post game voicemail, I guess. I'm going to try to do that. Keep up the good work, and I guess I'll send another voicemail later at some point.
Okay. So just a slight correction on that. When I made that episode, the only player that I was talking about not letting take their starting position was Patrick Williams when it comes to Torrey Craig. And that's because I think that Kobe White is better off the bench. So I think you kind of mixed them two together because I did talk about in that episode Javon Carter being the best option to start there, but I don't think there's anything wrong with Kobe White coming off the bench. I actually prefer Kobe White to come off the bench. So that was mainly built around Patrick Williams and Torrey Craig, mainly because Torrey Craig does a lot of the same things that Patrick Williams does, but Patrick Williams should be the better player, and he's younger. That is why I say that he should not come in and take that starting position. Well, Patrick Williams, it says a lot if Patrick Williams doesn't come in this training camp in a way where he wins that starting position outright. I think that is a huge sign for concern for this team, and I do think that is then something that this it caused a little bit of concern. Not a huge amount. Patrick Williams is still young. He still has tons of time to develop and things like that. But like it would start some things. Now, I want to see Kobe White come off the bench. I think that's best suited for his skill set. I think he's going to be able to have a lot of things go through him and not have to worry about playing with a bunch of ball dominant players and really have an opportunity to get his shot off. But so just a slight correction on that one. But ultimately, I'll say this is that you do have to be ready. And nothing should be given to Patrick Williams, right? Patrick Williams needs to come in with the level of effort and things that he needs to earn that starting position. So just want to be clear there. I'm not saying that he should not earn that, they have to earn that starting position. I'm just saying that Patrick Williams hopefully comes in with that level of focus and things that you pointed out, that he grabs that and snatches that starting power forward position outright, and he wins that the way that he should. At least that's my opinion. You guys can let me know what you think on all that down below. All right, let's get into the next one. Oh, but as far as your point of season tickets, shout out to you for getting season tickets, brother. That is huge. Yeah, send in voicemails, whatever you need to do, and hopefully, you get to see a lot of Bulls wins this season. But all right, let's get into the next voicemail. This one's from Reginald.
Hey, this is Reginald from Columbus, Georgia. I was listening to you and Pat Designer the other day on Locked On Bulls talking about Lonzo, and I gotta agree with both of y'all. I don't see I'll say this. Looking for someone with 80% of the skill set of Lonzo Ball is incredibly difficult. When I was looking at the free agency for next year, the only guys I could possibly do some of what Lonzo does is Mike Conley, Chris Dunn, and maybe Chris Paul, who's a free agent. But my question to you is there anyone out there, not with just the ability to play defense or facilitate or shoot three, but how many people are out there with high basketball IQ as a point guard? I mean, but I just think it's best to look in this draft. But how many point guards are staying 3-4 years to get the experience, to get the know-how, how to run the game, and how to call out plays, how to be that forward general. Like most point guards nowadays, leave after 1 or 2 years. So,
all right. So here's the thing: the Bulls giving Javon Carter a 3-year contract. I think that means that they're hoping that he's going to fill that starting point guard role until they naturally find their next starting point guard. Now, as far as point guard free agents that could be out on the market next year, you didn't mention Drew Holiday. Now, he does have a player option. He could definitely, and he fits that. I think Drew Holiday comes in, and the way that he defends, the way that he can score at times, Drew Holiday would be a really good, point guard for the Chicago Bulls going forward. But got to see what they do and what they do with their cap space, things like that. Tyus Jones is another one that could become available. And while not the defender that Lonzo Ball or Javon Carter is, the way that he manages the game, his assist-to-turnover ratio is amazing. I do think that if he was given kind of thrust into more of a run the offense type point guard role, he could definitely thrive in that. So that's something to look at as well. But, hey, listen, we'll see. At the end of the day, it's this, right? The Bulls aren't going to find a one-for-one replacement with Lonzo Ball. It's just not likely to come just by going out in the free agent market and shopping. Now, it could come eventually, and hopefully, they get a player that's ready to step in and give that level of effort for the Chicago Bulls. But at this point, I think the Bulls have made their choice now on their point guard of the current, right? And that's Javon Carter. And hopefully, you never know, Kobe White could step into that big time. Ayo Dosunmu still, I know some Bulls fans don't want to hear it, but still has potential to develop into that role. I think he's better suited as a combo guard, but you just never know. And how the makeup of the team could also change the needs of the point guard position, right? If the Bulls do go a different route, whether it be coach or whether it be different center, something like that, you can see Kobe White stepping in there and playing a Jamal Murray type starting point guard role, right? But I think Billy Donovan would have to change his offense to operate more inside out at that point, and we'll see if Billy Donovan does that. But there is signs for that, right? And so we'll end up seeing what happens and what this team ends up becoming as far as the point guard position. But replacing Lonzo Ball isn't easy, and we've seen it. And the Bulls have been now trying to do that now for a year and a half, and they haven't done it meaningfully. And so we'll see with Javon Carter. He's the next up to get the attempt for the Chicago Bulls, and we'll see what he can bring for this team. I think that he's going to pay off pretty big for this team, but we have to see if ultimately the way that the team comes together with him at that point guard position gets us back in that win column big time. All right, let's get into this next voicemail. This one's from Shay.
What's up, Hayes? This is Shay. A lot of people have been talking about the Chicago Bulls front office and all of that. And I admit they're not perfect. They do a lot of unfortunate moves that we don't understand, especially when it involves the size on this team. But I'm going to need fans to to just shut the fuck up on some things, saying that they the worst front office and the worst GMs, and just saying certain shit like, oh, they didn't do much this season, or, oh, you didn't get a good replacement for Lonzo Ball. Let's face it, there aren't a lot of free agent point guards that could be a good replacement for Lonzo Ball, especially when you're not in the most flexible state of payment, especially with Lonzo Ball's contract still on your books. And not to only mention, it's not AK that didn't want to go into the luxury tax. It's Jerry Ronsdorf. So basically, I could say AK did the best with what he had. And now, look, I'm not going to say that he's perfect. He's made some mistakes here and there, especially with drafting Dalen Terry when you could have got Walker Kessler or EJ Liddell, because we do need a backup power forward. I will give them that. But at the same time, I'm going to need fans to be a little bit more grateful, because, let's face it, they have tried and they've addressed a lot of things that we've asked for. Like the backup center, saying Booch doesn't have a backup. They got Andre Drummond, saying that we don't have a lot of shooting. I mean, they didn't get great shooting, but they got some good to decent shooters, and they got some real good people who've been in the playoffs and who have won championships, such as Alex Caruso, you know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I feel like we're putting AK in a hot seat a little bit too much, especially when his hands are tied on a lot of these moves because of the cap space. And because when you think about it, he did give us what we want, a lot of things that we did want and that we did ask for. He gave them to us, such as a playoff team. We were tired of being a rebuilding team, and he gave it to us. Anyway, tell me what you think. Peace.
Okay, so AK's done a pretty good job. When you look at how he's had to operate, even bringing in Lonzo DeMar, Alex Caruso, that was a year that we technically didn't have any true cap space, and he made it happen. Now, we had to give up assets to make those moves happen, and that's unfortunate, right? But AK has done a pretty good job with what happened. I think, especially when you look at the roster that he constructed, which was a number one team in the East, right? But again, not a championship contender, just being fair. They were not a championship contender, but that team was working. It was working better than what we've seen since Lonzo Ball went down. And despite what some people like the Ultimate Rage would say, it's not all built around Lonzo. Lonzo's not even a star-level player. He's never been that per his output, but he had that type of impact for this Chicago Bulls team with the way that we played in totality, and that is why roster construction is important. And so we never really got to see that full roster together, right? We didn't even get to see a lot of Patrick Williams in that season and know like how he have grown and developed with Lonzo, things like that, and they would have developed as a defensive tandem around those that core three that has their own defensive liabilities and issues. So AK's done solid. I think that the pivot, right? The fact that we haven't seen now since the Lonzo Ball injury and he went down, we haven't seen a solid pivot from that scenario into where it's now put the Bulls back on that trajectory. And that's where a lot of Bulls fans have their issues, as well as drafting. Now, you pointed out Walker Kessler. You said EJ Liddell. We got Justin Lewis in that draft, who is very similar to EJ Liddell. We haven't even seen what EJ Liddell is at the NBA level, but Walker Kessler is absolutely a player that you see. He could have been the heir apparent to take over that starting center position from Vooch. He could have also, had we drafted him last season, maybe we could have let, like a lot of Bulls fans, we could have let Vooch just walk. And now we couldn't use those assets to go anywhere else, but maybe we could have done that and then, opened up some other things, right? So the drafting aspect of what AK and Eversley have failed at, I think, is the biggest and most egregious thing, just because it's left us in a situation where there's so many question marks around our young core, and that's a young core that's supposed to be picking up the mantle and carrying it for this version of the Bulls team. And so there's enough now questions around that that's where AK, I think, has done raised the most questions at. The not having moves at the trade deadline and all that type of stuff, it brings its own questions. But I think when you look at that aspect of it, as far as the draft, right, there's still a lot of question marks with those young players, and haven't necessarily had the coach in Billy Donovan that has developed those talents either. So as long as you have young players that are supposed to be part of your big future, but there's still big question marks, that's always going to be a question for the GM and the Bulls management at that point in time. So, hey, you guys can let me know what you think on that one down below as well. All right, let's get into this last voicemail for today. This one is from Casual Kelder.
All right, I wanted to talk a little bit about you and me actually think this year's Bulls are a bit underrated. I think this year's team has improved from last year. I don't know how they can't be unless, something crazy happens. But, they brought the whole team back, which was a 40-win team that lost a lot of close games. I'm agreeing with you on that. They added great players. Javon Carter and Torrey Craig are already my favorite players on the team. I love them as role players. And I think, this year they're going to be better this year. I think some other teams got better too. I think, especially Atlanta's going to be better. And, from coming up, on the same level as the Bulls. We'll see how that goes. As far as the disrespect, I think this is where it's coming from. I want to know your thoughts. Long term, this does not look good for the Bulls. I don't think. And that's my opinion. It looks to me, and, granted, no, I'm just some guy calling from North Carolina, but it looks to me like they have, aging stars who are not top level stars, who don't complement each other. So, they're good players. I mean, they're all good players. But Levine, DeMar, and, Bucci, they don't complement each other very well. Their skills don't match up because maybe these role players can help fill the gap for this year. But long term, you gotta have those guys. They don't have that guy, and they don't have a young guy. I would say their young core, their young players are probably for sure in the bottom 10 of young player groups in the NBA. They just don't have that guy coming up. So what you see is an aging core. One guy, their best player has bad knees. The other best player is a mid-range player who would have been great in the 90s, but has not had a ton of success. And another center that's about the same thing. I think that's where you're getting the disrespect, is because people are not just looking at this year. This year looks okay, but this year is their ceiling year, I think. And long term, we're looking at like the team with not a lot of young talent that can carry them going forward, and aging guys that I think looks like they're just going to ride them off until their contract's gone and then try to figure out what to do with that money. But, the plan is, I think, what's causing national disrespect. I don't think national people respect the Bulls' direction. What do you think about that? Bye.
Okay, so first off, another casual thing from Kelder. Zach LaVine doesn't have bad knees. Let's be clear here. He had one major knee injury since his initial ACL surgery, and that is atypical of the type of surgery that he had. Eventually, you do have to go in and get that cleanup, which Zach LaVine did. And so he's gotten better as an athlete since his initial ACL injury, but Bulls fans got to stop acting like it's this thing every year since his ACL injury or it's something with his knee. It hasn't been that. And Zach LaVine has been a pretty healthy player since that time period of his knee as far as the knee goes. Now, again, a season ago, when him and Lonzo both went down against the Golden State Warriors, that was the first time we had something major with his knee since his ACL surgery. So, come on. You got to be better aware than that. Now, as far as the young talent, I got to agree. There are question marks on the young talent. I still see the potential in that young talent. And I think that, with a renewed focus on development, we're going to see those players turn into something. But, the core, I think the core fits good together. It's just that we saw it fit best together when you had a point guard that covered up a lot of their deficiencies, being it defense, being it three-point shooting. That's when this team looked the best. And so I think we've gotten caught up in now what the team has looked like without that, right? And so we'll see how that develops. But I think this core can work. I think you need to make some tweaks to the offense, and you need to have a different point guard in there, which we'll see what Javon Carter does. But I agree with you on the young talent. I do there. There's question marks in it. But where I think we differ at is that you don't think that young talent has the talent, and I think they do. I just think that it needs to develop here in Chicago, and then we can see what we have in them. Let me know what you guys think on all that down below. But that's it for today's episode. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, bullcentralpod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for our mailbag episodes, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related because of you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See you ready if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.